Okay. So, hello everyone, and welcome to 25th Guwahati MuleSoft Meetup. The topic for our today's meetup is MuleSoft Composite Connector and MuleSoft Part 2. We already did our Part 1 earlier, so the recordings are already present in the meetup page. You can go and visit that. So, today we'll start with the second part of Composite Connector. Before we start, some safe harbor statement. Next slide, please, Abhishek. So both the speaker and the host are organizing this meetup in individual capacity only. We are not representing our companies here. This presentation is strictly for learning purpose only. Organizer or presenter do not hold any responsibility that same solution will work for your business requirement. This presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. Some housekeeping. So as we are already recording, we will be sharing this recording in the meetup page within 24 hours. If you have any questions, you already have the mic access. You can chip in anytime and you can ask your question over there. At last, you'll get a feedback form. So I'll request please fill up the feedback form because that will help us to make any changes or whatever suggestion you have. You can suggest the topic you want next, and we can try to bring that up as well. So please provide your feedback. I'm the organizer for this meetup. So I'm a MuleSoft ambassador, a regional leader for MuleSoft Meetup India. I'm frequent speaker, leader for Guwahati and Lucknow. I have total 9 years of experience and seven in MuleSoft. I'm certified developer and architect for MuleSoft. I have MuleSoft Industry and GTM Champion. I'm Salesforce Double Star Ranger rank. I have certification in Salesforce, Solis, Delbumi, GCP. I write blogs and create technical videos. And I own a patent for developing a portable washing machine. So that's all about me. Over to you, Abhishek. All yours.
Thank you, Abhishek. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the meetup. Um, I am the speaker of today's meetup. My name is Abhishek. I'm working as lead engineer in entity data. I'm certified MuleSoft developer and architect. I have 7+ years of experience. This is my fourth or fifth MuleSoft meetup, and yeah, that's it about my side. So let's start with today's topic. So the agenda of today's meetup is, since this is the MuleSoft meetup part 2, first we will do the recap of Salesforce Composite Connector and S Objective, which we have covered as a part of part 1. Then Composite, then we'll start today's meetup, which is Composite Batch Connector, then S Object Tree Connector, Composite Graph. We will be having the demo, question answer, and then quiz. So let's start with the recap. So basically, what is composite connector? Composite connector enables you to work with Salesforce batch and S object tree. Basically, S object is a Salesforce object, and tree structure is we will be having one parent node, and then the child nodes, child object. When we take the example is account is a parent, then contact is associated with account. On the other side we can see opportunities lead associated with that, so it forms the tree structure. So this is that S object tree. And then S object is object that is stored in the Salesforce database like account and contact. And what's the use of Salesforce composite connector is, instead of making frequent calls to Salesforce, we can have one single call where we can perform multiple operations which we used to do in the frequent calls. So that's the benefit of composite connector. The advan the advan the benefit is like it reduce the round trip call, it reduce the number of rate limits, and it improves the system performance. So, and in previous meetup, we also covered how we need to connect to Salesforce using the connected apps and all. So we are going to skip that part in today's. Then, what is Salesforce Composite Connector? So mainly from the MuleSoft side, we use Composite Request, Composite Graph, Batch, S Object Tree, S Object Collections. If you see on the right side, we have this many operations, but mainly we use these 5 operations more frequently. So we are going to cover these operations. So let's start with composite batch. Composite batch request. So it executes up to 25 sub requests in the single request. Each sub request counts against the rate limit, and it's the behavior of composite batch request is similar to the composite execute composite request. The only difference is, if you see composite sub request, 25 sub request, it's same, rate limit is also same. The only difference is between composite execute composite request and composite batch is sub requests are independent in composite batch. You can't pass the information between them. So if you want to perform the independent operation one after another, so instead of Salesforce by doing multiple calls, you can have a single call where you can perform the independent operation, and we can reduce the we can improve the system performance. Then sub request execute serially in order in the request body. Then we have this many operations available, like limit, as object resources, query all, search, connect resources, chatter resources. Composite batch sample request, if we talk about this, so this is the format we have. We will be having the batch request, which is the array. Inside a batch request, we will be having the multiple sub request. You can see sub request 1, sub request 2, sub request 3. And like in the composite connector, we have halt on error equal to true. Similarly, this boolean flag is also available. The benefit of this boolean flag is, if we are executing 10 or 50 like multiple sub requests, and we want to enable the transaction management, means if any of the sub requests fall, all the sub requests should stop processing. It should not be like half process done and half process got failed. So if we want to enable that transaction, we can use halt on error that we have seen in the last meetup also. Then this is the sample request. You can see we have the object at start, then we have halt on error equal to true, then we have a batch request, which is the which will act as a parent node here, because Salesforce always expect the array in the input. Then first request is we have a method, URL, and rich input. Inside a rich input, we provide our entire body. Method is where we specify which method we need to, whether that is get, post, patch. And then URL. In the URL, if you see, we specify the version. Then as objects, account, since we are performing the operation on account, so account object name, and then account ID, where we need to perform the patch operation. If it is a post operation, so we will specify the method post, version, as object, and account. Since post operation URI parameter will not be there, this part will not be there. Then rich input, where we will be having the object. We can specify our entire data, where which we need to insert into that. This is the first operation sub request. Then we can have a second sub request. Like that, in the single call, you can have multiple sub request. So let's quickly change to demo. So you can see we have a application deployed. We have a listener over here. I'm passing the composite batch I selected. So if you see, we have a Salesforce composite connector. I just drag and drop composite batch, and then we have a transform message just to transform it to JSON. So this is very basic sample request. Um, here we have a composite batch request. So in this request, we are going to perform 4 operation. First one is patch, then patch for account, then we can have for contact. First, we are updating the account, then we are creating a new contact, then we are getting the get information, and then we have this get call for the query all. So, and one more important thing here is, if you see composite batch, we have selected payload.batch request. Like I have explained, Salesforce will always expect the array. So here we need to select batch payload.batch request so that this entire array will go to Salesforce. So let's execute this, and we got the response. You can see has error equal to true, and then we have invalid name for this, and then remaining things are there. So the error has happened because name is name one, so this sub request got failed. And now if I remove this, and this is the success scenario, where we can see has error equal to false. The first uh, first method, first sub request got executed successfully. We got 204 status code. Then this is the second one where we have created the account. 201 account created successfully. This is the account ID. And then this is the third sub request call where we are querying the account. You can see here get. And this is the fourth one where we are doing query all for the account. So whatever accounts are available, you can see all the list over here, where we are taking the name, select name from account. So we are getting the name. So this is about composite batch. If you see, there is no relation between first request and second request. All the sub requests are independent. So this is how the difference of composite execute composite request and composite batch. If I go back to composite request, we can see this is kind of brush up. So again, we have this payload where uh, we are passing the first sub request, and we will be having the reference id. This reference id, you can see we are using in the second sub request to create the another account. So this is the child account, and then this is the parent account. Then we have the post method for creating the contact. So for the parent account, we are creating the contact, and then we are doing the get call. So this is how the composite batch request we have. Um, then we'll move to S object tree. Okay, so in S object tree, uh, it creates one or more S object tree with root elements that records of the specified type. The entire sub request count as a single call towards the API limit. So this is the best part of S object tree. Even if you are executing number of requests, it will count as a single call. If the error occurs while creating the record, the entire request fails. Then sub request executes serially in order of the request body. The way we specify the sub request one after another, in that order only it executes. Need to specify the root element of the connector, example account. This we will see in the demo. And then request can contains the following: up to 200 record across all trees. So, and then we have 5 different S object types, and S object level up 5. So we can access 200 records in one single call. That's the limitation. Then 5 records of different times in the sense account, contact, opportunity, lead. These are the 4 types. We can have one more. So at in single request we can access only 5 different types, and it can go up to 5 deep levels. So it's not like from account we can go to lead and then 2 3 more deeper level. We can have up to 5 levels only. So that's the limitation of S object tree. Then this is the sample request of S object, where we will be having the record. It starts with the object, the entire request body. We have the records. record is an array where we specify multiple uh, sub request. From here till here we have a first sub request where we are specifying the attributes. Then attribute contains type, which is a account type, and it will be having the reference id. Point to note over here is reference id. Even though we are having the different sub request, but the reference id will be unique for entire request. We cannot means we cannot use the same reference id 1 for the third sub request, even though that is a part of another sub request. So that is important. So if we are having multiple like 500 operations, so from reference id 1 to reference id 500 it will go. Then we have a request body where we are specifying name, phone number, website, number of employees, industry, and all, whichever record we want to create. S object tree is mainly just to create. We cannot perform the update or get operation in S object tree sample S object tree. And then for the account, we can have a contact, which is the second root element for the account. So for the same account, we are creating a contact, which will be having the type contact. Reference ID is reference to, and then the contact information data. Then this is the first sub request. In second sub request, again we can create an account which will be having the reference id ref3, and then name, phone, website, likewise. So in this request operation we are creating a two account, and out of two account, one account has another thing, another sub element as a contact, which of that account. And if you see the response structure, it is similar to the composite batch, where we will get to know whether it has uh, error has occurred or not. Has error true, then we have a result where we will for respective reference id we will get the right id which we have created account. So this is the reference id 1 for account. Then we have a reference id 3, not reference id 2. The reason behind that is once we execute the request, all the request of same type, here if you see we have a two account, and account is a parent node. So first all the account will be created. If there is no error, then first all the accounts like reference 1, reference 3 will be created. After that, with reference 1, a contact will be created which is reference 2. So that's why we are getting the response like this: reference 1, reference 3, reference 2. I hope it is clear. Then the advantages of S object tree. So creating multiple unrelated records of a same type we can do. Then creating nested records of root element, single call against the API remit, and single response. Again, the common advantage is same. It improves system performance, reduce transit time between the MuleSoft and Salesforce. So this is about the S object. And if you see here we have create S object tree. Um, we can from the composite connector we can drop S object tree. Then here we can specify the root element. So this S object tree operation can be performed only relate to account. We cannot perform this other than account like custom object. If we want to do that, we need to select that root type here. So that's the limitation. Only for selected root type only we can perform the operation. And if you see, we have passed payload dot records. Like I said, records is a record is an element which is an array, and to the Salesforce we only pass the array. So if we go back to Postman, this is how the structure is. Record is an array. In this we have the first request, and then we have a second request. First request contain account reference 1, reference 2. Then for the second request, we can have a reference 3, reference 4, anything. And then this is how it is. If I send the request to that, okay, we are getting duplicate detected. Okay, because of this email ID, let me update it to 123. Okay, so now we are getting this response, which is has error false. It is executed successfully, and this is the results where we can see reference 1, reference 3, and then reference 2 for contact. This is how it is. And if we want to add one more thing, so we can just copy this contact information from here. We can go here and then paste this contact information. And if you see now, reference ID of contact 2 and contact 4 are same. Let's execute it. Let's see if so. You can see the entire request got failed. We are getting invalid reference 2. So none of the records got processed. Now if we are modifying it to reference 4, and if we are triggering it back, okay, yeah, 1 2 3 4 and 1 2 5. Email ID should be unique for contact. So we can see has error equal to false. First reference 1, reference 3, then reference 2, reference 4. Similarly, we can have one more root element for leads and you or opportunities, and for the related contact you can create the contact and you can create the opportunities. So all these operations can be performed in the single request. So this is about the S object tree. Any questions on this? I hope it is clear.
Any questions? Else we can take it at the last.
Okay, sounds
Between
good.
Yeah,
one,
Ganesh.
sorry, Abhishek.
Yeah.
Uh, so between this account and contact that we just created, reference one and two, is
Yes.
there any relationship established, or we have to give the reference one exclusively here?
So, okay. So since you can see, this is the entire request, sub request, I would say,
Yeah.
and the parent node is account. And inside of account parent node, you are creating a contact. So that's how the reference between connection between account and contact is established in a subject tree.
Okay. Exclusively, we no need to give the record ID or
That is
reference ID.
correct.
Okay.
Yes. Unlike in composite connector, where we will be having the reference ID, and that reference ID we need to pass here. So if you have observed, I was covering the I was planning to cover it later, but yeah, if you observe here, we are making HTTP call, but in S object tree we are not making HTTP calls, and that's the only reason why it's counting as a single API call for the entire request.
Okay.
If internally if you are using the HTTP call, so every call count as a single request. So HTTP call is always the cost consuming part.
Okay, Abhishek. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice question. Thank you.
So the question here is, so we are creating a relationship from from one to one or one to many.
We can create one to one, one to many, anything is possible for this. We can, like you can see record, we can create multiple contact as well.
So as a single call, we are just sending the data to process it.
That is correct.
Yeah.
In the single call we are sending the data to process it, and Salesforce treat it as a single call, and if everything goes well, then only the entire process executes, otherwise entire process fails. Okay, so let's move to the composite graph. Composite graph, if we consider, this is little complicated topic, but since we already work on composite connector, we can easily relate it with the composite graph. For the heads up, composite graph is just a one wrapper on the top of composite connector. Okay, now let's start with composite graph. Composite graph provide enhanced way to perform composite request, like I said, which execute a REST API request in a single call. Composite graph extend regular composite request by allowing you to assemble a more complicated or complete series of related objects and records. So if we have a I will cover this point also. So in short, if we have a complicated logic where first we are creating the account, then contact, then leads, then for that account we are creating opportunity, for that opportunity we are creating a quote, and the quote, then we have the sales rep actions also, and all those. If it is very complicated part, then we can use in that case, Salesforce advises to use composite graph. That is the crux of this point too. I'll cover this again. Then composite graph also enables you to ensure that the steps in the given set of requests are either all completed or not all not completed. If you use this option, you don't have to check the requests were successful or not. So in composite graph, we uh, like you can see, in the graph we have the graph 1 and graph 2. uh, we specify graph id as a graph 1 and graph 2, where each inside each graph id we are ultimately using composite request, and similarly in the graph 2 id also we are using composite request. So if graph 1, any of the requests from graph 1 fails, so it will not impact any request in the graph 2. Graph 2 will execute successfully. So that's the main advantage of composite connector, and that is in this part. If any of the request, either all the completed or not all completed, if you use this option, you don't have to check the which request were successful. And then regular composite requests have the limit of 25 sub requests, which we have checked. Composite graph increases this limit to 500. That's the major advantage of composite graph. If you see, we have a node, kind of parent node, and then we have two child node. We can say account and then um, opportunities. So that's how the graph work. It will create the contact also, and it can create the opportunity also for that in the single request. And if you see, this is kind of example I was talking about. First we are creating the account, then contact, then campaign for that account, opportunity, lead, campaign members with the composite graph request. So first we are creating account. We are using this parent id to use the child account. For that child account we are using the account id to create the opportunity. Similarly, this account id we are using to create the contact one, then reports to contact 2 and reports to contact 3. Then another graph, this is the graph number 1, and then this is the graph number 2. We can assume we are creating a campaign. We can use that campaign id for that opportunity. We can update this update means patch operation for this opportunity using the campaign id. Then with the same campaign id we can use the campaign manager. We can create the lead. We can use lead id to use campaign. So this complex operation we can perform in the single request. That's the best use case of composite graph. And if any of the operation fails, since this operation is kind of independent, except this part is independent of uh, graph 1, so we can divide this operation in the two parts, or that depends on the business functionality. If they want, if they don't want, we can have this entire scenario as a single graph. So which I here again the same create account one, then use reference ID for account two, like I have explained it. So we are having the 7 operations here. This operation we can perform in the single request. Then okay, then composite graph sample request. So we can have a graph ID. um, Graph ID is so graph composite graph is the array which will be having the sub request, we can say, and in each sub request we will be having the unique graph id 1, graph id 2, graph id 3, likewise up to 500 limit. Then in graph id 1 we can entirely use the composite connector request. In composite connector we were having the option to for the transaction management, like all or none equal to true. Here by default it is true only, it's compulsorily true. So that means if inside a graph one in any of the request fails, entire graph one will fail. But if there are having, if we have graph 1, graph 2, graph 3, and if any of the request fails in the graph 1, that will not impact graph through graph 2 and graph 3. So that's the beauty of composite graph. We can virtually segregate the request. So let's see the demo. So before that we'll go to Salesforce. We'll see the Salesforce composite graph. And if you see, we are specifying payload.graph. Again, since graph is the array, and yeah, that's the only configuration we have to do here. And if we go to man, we can see the request graph is an array. Then we have the graph ID. In the first sub request, we have the graph ID, which is graph 1. Then this is entirely composite request, which is again the array, where we are making the HTTP calls. First, we are creating the account. Then for that account, we are creating the contact. But and every sub request has the reference ID. This reference ID can be used in the another sub request to connect between the two sub requests. Like you can see, for the contact, account ID equal to new account dot ID. Then we have a third operation where we are creating opportunity for that account. And here as a point of connection is this one. For this account only, we are creating the account ID. And for this opportunity, if we want to use further, we have a reference ID for that. So let's trigger the request. We can see the response, composite response. So we can see graph is again the array, where we can see graph ID 1 and we can see the response for that. First request 201, second request created 201 for account, and similarly opportunity also got created successfully, and at last is successful equal to true. This is related to a single graph. Now if we go to another one where we are having the two graph 1 and graph 2, and if we see, reference IDs are still will be independent, unique throughout the request. We cannot use same reference ID in graph 2. So this is how it is. First we are creating the account, then with that account we are doing the get operation, which will be having the reference ID this one. next we have another graph where we are creating another account. For that account we are doing get operation, then we are performing the post contact operation for that account. If I execute the request, we can see the response 200, and here graph 1 successful, composite response is successful. We can see the response, and then we have a graph 2 which got failed. And this is how so if graph 2 is fails, it will not impact the graph 1. And the reason for this is failed is because of duplicate contact id. So let's make the contact id sample 298. So you can see here, right? Like I said, so first graph request got executed successfully, and second graph request, even if that failed, first request got executed successfully. So that's how we have segregated the composite request from each other. Now if you see now, if we are sending the request, both graph 1 and graph 2 is successful, and is successful equal to true. Now again, if I make any change, say name 1 in explicitly in graph 1, uh, before that, let me, okay, let's see. So, oh, I made in graph 2, 1 minute. So this we have already seen. Let's make in graph 1. So you can see graph 1 got failed and is successful equal to false. No need to go and check the entire. We can directly see graph 1 and is successful equal to false, and graph 2 also failed because of duplicate transaction, duplicate contact. So like that we can implement. So if we want to, so now in this case what will happen, graph 1 will fail and graph 2 will be successful. It will create a new contact, it will get the contact information, and it will create contact for that information, that account. So you can see graph 1 got failed is successful equal to false, but whether graph 2 is successful and is successful equal to true. So this is all about composite graph request. So basically composite graph request, like I said, we use when we have very complicated tasks to perform one after another. So points to remember, composite graph have advantage that each graph is guaranteed to either complete all its subrequests successfully or to be rolled back completely. In other words, the all or none parameter is implicitly considered to be true for each graph. Like I said, to ensure that graph are independent, the following rules apply. Subrequest is subrequest in one graph can't be reference to the another graph. This point also I have covered. The reference ID which we are using in graph 1 cannot be used in graph 2. The reason behind that is if the graph 1 fails, so and if we are using the reference ID of graph 1 into the sub request of graph 2, so it will hamper the performance of graph 2 since graph 1 got failed. So that's why we cannot reference the sub request from one graph to another graph. Each graph in one composite request operation must be independent. If one graph can't be processed successfully, that must not prevent other graph in the same operation from being processed successfully. So all graphs are independent of each other. It's more efficient to have one graph with 10 nodes rather than it's more efficient to have nodes rather than one graph with 500 nodes. So that's the best practice Salesforce recommend for using the graph, composite graph. And that's it about this demo. Any questions? Abhishek, I'm done from my side.
Uh, thanks, Abhishek. Go to the next slide.